Namaskar. Namaskar to all of you. First, kindly let me express my gratitude to the Indian Mission for giving me an opportunity to place my views before this august audience on the life and teachings of the greatest man of the modern era, Mahatma Gandhi. Forced by the circumstances, we are today meeting virtually, but the issues are real. Last year, at the commencement of Gandhiji's 150th anniversary, I got an opportunity to speak in Frankfurt on a subject that was so dear to his heart. He didn't speak much about it, but he just lived it. He preached it by practicing it, by his umpteen silent examples, his simplicity. He would never boast of it, but would mind others just by doing something conspicuously, so that others would be motivated to practice it too. This he would do without uttering a single word, and that sometimes was the most complicated simplicity for many. Through his simplicity, he wanted to underline the basic Indian tenet of frugal lifestyle. Today, we call it sustainable consumption. Last year, the context of my talk was different. The Sustainable Development Goals, adopted by UNO in 2015. At that time, I delved into SDG 12 in particular, that is, sustainable consumption and production patterns. Interestingly, I was speaking at the epicenter of capitalism, and I was presently surprised that most of those present there complimented me for discussing this subject. This year again, the topic of my talk remains the same: no to consumerism. And to be precise, to conspicuous consumption, ostentatious consumption, demonstrative consumption. And this time the context is different, entirely different. It relates to the last 6-7 months that the world has witnessed, experienced, and seen with abject helplessness. There is sharp fall in economic activities the world over. There are incidents of social and political strife. Our GDP too has fallen by 24%. But as a nation, we have not cursed our fate. We have taken it in our stride. After initial shocks, our smiles also are returning. And the happiness index is fast picking up, much faster than the economic indices. This is because of the inherent resilience that we have strengthened over the centuries, that we have developed over the centuries. These are because of our values. And Gandhiji believed in this inner strength of his countrymen. He always tried to exhort their virtues to the fore. During the initial months of corona pandemic, we saw millions of migrants going back to their villages. Many more were stranded in their respective places of work. The governments and different agencies were working hard to mitigate their sufferings. But more than their effort was the individual and collective consciousness of the people of India. We could see the civilization of sharing in action. If there were thousands walking back or queuing up for the food, there were thousands others offering them food and other necessities also. They were not prodded by anyone to do so. It was their inherent sense of sharing. And this sense of sharing has been silently internalized by us through our frugal consumption behavior over the centuries. There is a verse in Upanishads, great Indian scriptures, Ten Taktena Bhujita, which means consume with a sense of sacrifice. And this can only be imbibed by things like restrained consumption, judicious consumption. Our rishis had taught us so. Our ancestors practiced it religiously. Our women folk perpetuated it through folk. While sowing seeds in their farms, they would pray to the god, please give a part of its harvest to all those who are needy. And if something is still left, please give it to our children. That is the pinnacle of sacrifice even a common man would show in his or her routine life. Gandhi ji personified it. Remember his favorite bhajan, the devotional song, Vaishnav Jan to tene kahiye, jo peed par aayi chane re. That is, virtuous men are those who understand and share the pain of others. Later on, this thread was picked up by Pandit Deendayal Upadhyay, who taught us the virtues of Maryadit consumption, that is, ethical consumption, again, restrained consumption. And he enshrined these virtues in his philosophy of integral humanism. His contemporary and fellow traveller and the founder of Deendayal Research Institute, Nanaji Deshmukh, validated this philosophy on the ground, and it was through his model of holistic development that we are now working upon. So we have internalized these virtues of restrained consumption from the preachings and the real lives of our role models like Gandhi ji, Deendayal ji, and Nanaji. Therefore, we did not take more than a day to recover from the shock of compromising our lifestyle in the face of the pandemic. The multidimensional fallout of COVID told us as to how to live with bare minimum things. Little and frugal food. Simplest of clothes. No ostentations. No unnecessary shopping. It was just in a matter of hours of the lockdown, and we were ready for a new lifestyle. The environment found its lost glory restored. People could be seen cheering at clear skies for once. A new generation of children could gaze at stars in the cities, which were otherwise fogged by industrial and vehicular pollutions for decades together. Social media was also at its creative best, narrating those good old days when we would live on meager things with more fun and gaiety. Yet it cannot continue for a long time. There would be some deterioration in this euphoric scenario. But this has taught us a lesson. If we were looking for attaining sustainable development goals, we need to adopt the good old ways of sustainable consumption first. And sustainable consumption doesn't mean compromising with quality of lifestyle. We just need to have a relook at the definition of quality life in accordance with our national and socio-economic milieu, with our ethos. We just need to shun greed. We might attain a better quality of life by adopting our lifestyle in consonance with our local value. This approach will help us to have a holistic look at life. We will need to preserve biodiversity for the sake of our coming generations. We'll have an emotional attachment with our traditions, and we will abhor waste. Some people say that this will diminish demand in the market, and thus the economies will suffer. True, there may be a shift in demands. Artificially created demands will certainly reduce, but the demands for good things of life will increase manifold, thus offsetting the losses in the former. Besides, the distribution of demand will also spread wide and uniform. It will be equitable distribution of wealth, which we always aspire for. These goods will be in demand for a larger section of the society, not limited to only a particular strata of the society. And thus, economic activities are bound to spur. This will also ensure that many more people are engaged in productive activities, including saving environment, in organic agriculture. All our natural resources will be managed in a better way. And what we call the 5J model in Indian parlance, Jan, Jal, Jangal, Janwar, Zameen, it will also flourish in a balanced manner. And perfecting and maintaining a balance among all these elements is not limited to India alone. Natural resources in any part of the world have a similar feature and hence the same yearning. They like to be nursed, not exploited. The proportions may differ from one place to another, depending upon their availability. While we celebrate the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi and express our gratitude to that pious and noble soul who gave the world the most cherished principles of non-violence and self-reliance, it is also time to have a relook at them in the present context. Gandhiji's philosophy is manifested in many ways. In our thoughts, in our actions, in the principles that govern us, both individually and collectively. It also underlines those virtuous pursuits in which a human being should normally engage. In Indian parlance, they are called Purushartha, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. These days, SDGs is the buzzword all across the world. Everybody is speaking about sustainable development goals. And perhaps it has been the most spoken subject during past half a century, much more than that. But what a paradox. While there is a general consensus on the subject, it still eludes the world. And perhaps for a simple reason. We do not pay heed to its prerequisite, the sustainable consumption. 111 years ago, rather 12 years ago, in 1908, Gandhiji had shown us the path through his book Hindu Swaraj. He outlined the threat to common future of humanity caused by a relentless quest for more material goods and services. 5 years back in 2015, the UN adopted 17 SDGs, and the 12th of which was about ensuring sustainable consumption and production patterns. That was perhaps the most befitting tribute to the enduring greatness of Mahatma Gandhi. And though unfortunately no mention was ever made of Gandhiji or the Indian values, which always preached a sustainable consumption in the preamble to this declaration. If we carefully read the subtext of the SDGs, we find that they are the mirror image of Gandhiji's philosophy as enunciated in his Hindu Swaraj and later on in other writings also, including the later versions of Hindu Swaraj. Sometimes people wonder if the principles initiated by Mahatma Gandhi are tenable in the modern world. First, the adoption of his philosophy in the SDGs, though without attributing them to him, bear testimony to the fact that these were not a flight of fancy, but doable. They reflected the real India, and now perhaps the real world too. All the great men that I have mentioned above believed that native and indigenous knowledge needs to be respected. Traditional wisdom, cultural practice need to be underlined. All these would shun the very idea of more consumption, which is both a cause and consequence of greed. I'm sure all of you will agree. Gandhiji asserted many times that the villagers were the real custodians of the natural resources of the country. Like Gandhiji, Nanaji also felt that since the villagers are the trustees of these resources, they love them, they care for them, they don't destroy them indiscriminately. They have an emotional bonding with them. They have stakes in their conservation and in the growth of natural resources. But at the same time, Gandhiji agreed that with technological advancement and changing aspirations of the people, the tools may have to be a little different. However, he continued to caution us against unnecessary consumption every time. Nanaji also adopted the same approach while evolving his model. He also said that real progress emanates from villages with the active participation of the villagers, with their initiative, with their intrinsic talent. But again, he was also not averse to adopting appropriate technological tools to further growth. Both of them, guru and disciple, believed that a harmonious growth can be achieved by employing cultural practices with necessary modern tools. This way, one can internalize the relationship between man and nature without any extra effort. It flows down naturally. And when human behavior manifests naturally, there is no element of sophistication and thus no overconsumption of goods and services. Led by Gandhiji, all our great men strongly believed that this could be achieved only by employing local resources and local talent. And this is the underlying principle of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's clarion call for an Atma Bharat, a self-reliant India, being vocal about local. Gandhiji averred that influences should also be local, not imposed from outside. Mere statistics cannot formulate plans for the development of an area, leave alone a nation. In the last decade, precisely in 2008, the then president of France, Nicolas Sarkozy, did not seem satisfied with the present state of statistical information about the economy and the society. So he set up a commission to identify the limits of GDP as an indicator of economic performance and social progress, including the problems with its measurement. And what did the commission find? It found that there were vast diversities that govern the development of a region. This is what exactly Mahatma Gandhi had said exactly 100 years ago before the commission was set. He had articulated some same concerns through his Hindu Swaraj. He had underlined the need for a decentralized system of economics and development so that local distinctive characteristics can always be factored in while formulating plans on the basis of statistical information. The subtext of Gandhiji's economic philosophy is also the sublime text of India's cultural values. It will be mere rhetoric talking of sustainable development without understanding the true meaning of sustainable consumption. At the NAM summit on 5th May 2020, the Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi summed up this predicament in no uncertain terms when he said, COVID-19 has shown us the limitations of the existing international system. In the post COVID world, we need a new template of globalization based on fairness, equality, and humanity. We need international institutions that are more representative of today's world. We need to promote human welfare and not focus on economic growth alone. This is what Gandhiji had preached us, in other words, 100 years ago. Namaskar. Jai Hind.